I suppose if I was to sum up my life, I think it is to say that it has been formed by learning one lesson, really. And that was that if I possess the ability to accept who I am, then every day after that would be a successful day. And I have to say that that has been the case for me for probably the last 30 years or so, since I've lost my sight. As Victoria said, I was in international investment banking, trying to dodge as much as I could the regulation of people like yourselves, and working on Wall Street and in London here, in a number of areas, and also I was a senior partner of a private investment bank, and we were doing very, very well, and I thought that was the way it was going to be, and I learned that actually life isn't as you think it is, and I also learned that actually the person that I was isn't the person who was the investment banker. When I went to Baltimore to see the best eye surgeon in the world, because I thought that money could save my sight. And when I got there, I found out that it couldn't. And on the way home, on the plane, the things that bothered me weren't the things that bothered me on the way there. On the way there, I was worried about, could I make it back in time so that I could make the appointment to do this deal, or could I get to Switzerland to work on this particular trust issue or whatever. Those were the things that bothered me. On the way back, I kept thinking, would I see my children graduate? Would I be able to see when they painted the house? There was a lot of these simple things in life meant an enormous amount to me. My mum wasn't well, and I was wondering if I was going to be able to see her last days, because I knew she'd only got maybe a couple of years left. And so when I came off the plane, I was a different person than when I went on the plane. But what then happened to me was that being the type of person who went from a small town in central Southern Ireland to this person who worked on Wall Street, the drive that took me there was also then turned and became quite negative, and I became self-destructive. I told all of the people that I worked with to where they could shove their jobs. Like I'd won the lottery in reverse in a way, and I walked out, And I remember my partner in Rain Partners saying, "But Tom, you're going to hurt people if you walk away." And I thought it didn't matter really, And I spent 4 years, I have to say, drinking the best wine I've ever drank in my entire life, to the point where I kind of damaged my liver, and the doctor told me if I didn't stop, sight loss would be the least of my problems. And I was sent to the RLSB, the charity that Victoria talked about, to learn how to use a talking computer. And I have to say that I went there with the most negative outlook on life of anybody, thinking that actually I was too good to be there, and in total denial of the fact that I was now a blind man. It was not a label I wanted to carry. And there I met a lot of other people who were blind, and I absolutely drove them mad. Instead of us learning how to use talking computers, we used to go down to the pub because that was my favorite place, and I gave them a whole new meaning to the words blind drunk. Right? And then one day, the then Chief Executive, who was my predecessor, grabbed me, and physically manhandled me, and he walked me up to the school. He was a big Liverpudlian guy, and he said, "Tom, you're a disgrace. Inside here are 150 children who would never travel the countries that you've traveled to, who would never get a chance to work in jobs that you've worked in, who will actually never even get to taste the drinks that you're drinking. So you can do one of two things. You can carry on and you can find the solution to your problems at the end of a bottle, or you can do something to help them. And I really wanted to hit him, but he was too big. And I couldn't see him properly either anyway. But that, for me, was a life-changing moment. When I went back home and when I calmed down, I figured that he was right. And actually, that, as Victoria said, I could continue to be a victim of sight loss, or I could accept who I really am. And part of who I really am is being blind, clearly, but it wasn't the biggest part of who I was. The biggest part of who I was that actually I was this person who had a bigger heart than the investment banker, who had bigger aspirations to help other people than the investment banker, who had started out many, many years as a young man studying economics in Dublin, thinking that what I could do was I could help lots of people who weren't able to help themselves, instead of going off into the world of making money for myself and for others. And I thought, well, I can go back and do that. And so I thought the best thing to do that would be to get a job. So I started applying for jobs, and I thought, well, I could be a finance director of a PLC. You know, I'm an accountant, I'm an economist, I was a banker, I could do all of that. Maybe a FTSE 100 would be looking for a good FD. But what I was to find was that no company in the UK wanted a blind accountant. And that took me back a bit. But then instead of falling down under that, I just thought, well, you're going about it the wrong way. And I went to see this totally blind guy who is very famous at getting blind people jobs. He's since died, poor man. But he said, right, Tommy, there's somebody down the east end of London is looking for a financial advisor. Why don't you try that? And I thought, well, I could do that. Falling off a log. So he got out the application form and filled it in. And about 2 weeks later, I got a response from Action for Blind People, who John knows very well, inviting me to come along and talk to them about being a factory manager. So he'd actually filled out the wrong form, put it in with the wrong time. But talking about serendipity, I ended up doing that. But it was to take me on a long journey. And in that journey went through Action for Blind People to Guide Dogs, where in Guide Dogs I got the opportunity to do some of the best research. I think, I worked with some really good people on some of the best research looking at the problem of sight loss. And I thought, and I'd learned that actually my experience showed that everybody that was looking at sight loss was probably looking at it through the wrong end of the telescope. They were seeing the blindness, and what they weren't seeing was the individual. And actually, the blindness affects the individual. And if the individual could get to a point that I got to, which was accepting who they are and accepting the situation they were in, that an awful lot of things in life would change. We did some research, and actually we found out that up to 70% of people who lose their sight become significantly depressed. It was the first time that that statistic had ever been unearthed. It was known by practitioners, I guess, but and from that, the sector now talks about emotional support at the point of diagnosis and later on. But it then took me on to look at children and young people. And here's something that absolutely knocked my socks off. If you lose your sight as a child, not like me, but if you lose your sight as a child, then you have a 90% chance of never working for more than 6 months in your life. You have a 70% chance of living throughout your adult life with chronic depression or anxiety. The consequence of that is that your child and my child will never form a positive, nurturing relationship with another human being, and they will grow up to be poor or lonely just because they are blind. And for me, that was the greatest social injustice that I've ever walked into in my entire life. So we became, as an organization, absolutely committed to tackling that particular problem. And if you talk, I spoke to some young people who had gone through the services that we were providing at the RLSB at the time, and they thought that they were good. They thought the grub could have been better, and the beds could have been a bit softer in our schools, but other than that, we were all right. Yeah. Well, actually, they said, Tom, you know what the real problem is we don't know how to hang out, we don't know how to be cool, and we're a bit worried about the future. Would you want that for your child after going to school? And the answer probably is no. So we closed the school, we sold everything, sorted out the organization, and transformed it into this organization that supported the real needs, the impact that was absolutely required by blind people, by blind young people. And one of the great things, I'm going to end on a really good success story. We, a couple of us many years ago were working on helping blind people to get around using digital technology. And it worked, but you had to have the equivalent of a wheelbarrow on your back to make it work. So one day we had 7 young blind people in the room, and we were saying, well, what would you like to do? We wanted to write a manifesto to beat up the Conservative government and tell them, come on, you've got to do more for blind people. And one of them said, well, what I want to do is I want to be able to go around the London Underground just like everybody else. So I don't mind getting bumped and everything. What I don't want is to have to depend on another person and hang on to them and do all of that. And the other guy said, yeah, because I've got a girlfriend that lives in North London, and I'd like to be able to do that as well, but I can't remember all these tunnels and I get lost. And they said, well, maybe an app would do it for us. So we said, okay, an app would solve any problem, won't it? So we went and we got a digital design studio called Us Two, who came in and said, yeah, we could build an app. And they helped us out, and we did a test at Pimlico Station. The BBC got hold of it and put it onto the Click program. It went worldwide, and Google contacted us and gave us $1 million and said, go and change the world. And we did. So we set up a company called Wayfinder.org, and Wayfinder developed a worldwide standard through the International Telecommunication Union, part of the UN. The first audio-based navigation standard ever. So it set the whole scene. The White House has just asked us to configure that into a US standard. The federal government wants to put Wayfinder into every transport facility in the United States. We're testing it in Spain, in Barcelona, in Oslo, in Sydney, in Los Angeles, and we've been lining up for a couple of places, Germany, looking for a place. And the Japanese Olympics are looking to put it in. It's now going to become a major tech company, all started by solving the needs of 7 young people sitting in a room, which just goes to show you that if you can sit in a room and accept who you are and begin to solve the problems rather than moan about the issues, then the world can be a different place, and actually you don't have to grow up to be poor or lonely just because you're blind. So thanks for listening to me.